welcome to today's English Home Language lesson. My name is Vash Suchit, and this lesson is proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with the Saibono Discovery Center. Now, grade 12s, we started these lessons since last week already, and hopefully by now you're getting into the swing of grade 12, the year as it unfolds, and you are prepping yourself to really have not a roller coaster ride, but to have a ride that is going to be smooth sailing, but getting the maximum marks in all of your formal assessments as well as your informal tasks when you are doing it, okay? So, because if you're going to look at your informal task, remember, you're going to use that to prep yourself to master the skill. So that when we assess you formally, you know that skill very well, or you know how to work with that skill, and then you can give us very good answers that we require of you. Right, so today we're going to be looking at one of the very important aspects of your entire English language in terms of your papers, all right? Now, when we talk about paper 3, and this is the one where it counts 100 marks. Remember, grade 12s, you would have written this in grade 11 and grade 10 and all the way since you started school when you did a paragraph writing and all the way up till a part where you had then done the essay. Now, remember from all of these years that we are saying to you, it's time for you to be creative. And creative means just that. You need to now let us get into your mind and the way you're thinking. You need to bring us into that fold so that we can also understand what kind of person you are in terms of your thinking, and can you put the knowledge you have gained over these years of living a life, can you take that knowledge and give us a viewpoint according to a topic given to you. So in terms of essay writing, it's 50 marks in your exams for the essay, and it's also 50 marks when you are basically working with the formal assessment, okay? Now, let's look at what we're talking about when we're dealing with creative writing. So I'm going to cover with you today the essay writing genres. That's all the types of essays that we work with. And then secondly, how to approach answering this in an essay question in the exam paper, or even as part of your SPA, your formal assessment for the year. Okay, now in paper 3, essentially you will get instructions, which you've seen over the years as well, okay? So the instructions is very clear. It's saying to you, please note that there's 2 parts to this paper, and the first part is basically section A. Now in section A, it is the one which costs 50 marks, the essay, and that is now where we want you to write a piece of a word count of between 400 to 450 words. Now, it might seem like it's a lot of words, but when you get into writing and you get a topic that you really, really are passionate about and you feel like you can go on talking about it forever, then 450 words is then not a lot of words, okay? So if you're struggling to write, yes, then obviously it will be a lot of words. But if you're targeting 2 to 2.5 pages, you're definitely within that word count that we need of you. But please, grade 12s, don't go and write just for the sake of writing and not follow the genres in terms of what's required of each of the genres, okay? So please go back and look at how you are working with the essay. Now, I'm sure you're already into this first term quite a few weeks into it, but you would have been assessed, or you're going to be assessed, depending on how ma'am or sir is working with the ATP. You're going to be covering the essay as the first or the second task in the formal assessment. So hopefully you have been able to get the maximum mark. Right, so when we're looking at any writing in terms of creative writing, or any writing in the whole of your English subject, you will have to ensure that you follow the writing process. Now, remember, if you don't obviously have a plan in place, then everything can happen to you and you'll be like, okay, didn't see this coming, now I'll have to address. So you got to have a plan in place. Okay, so that you are aware that if something should happen, I have plan A, B, C as a backup if the first one fails, all right? So when we're doing that, we're talking about planning. If you don't plan, then you basically are planning to then fail okay, completely. So please go back and look at the writing process very carefully. This is just a synopsis for you. In step 1, we basically are talking about your plan. All right, you're going to now be given anything between 6 to 7 topics for your essay. So you have those very many topics to write on. You've got to be able to sift through them and find which one's going to work for you, right? But we'll go through that. So the brainstorming part here is where you are planning and you're taking all these various ideas in your head and you are putting it down on a piece of paper or whichever paper you're using to write on, okay? And there you put your ideas down and it's called the pre-writing phase. Thereafter, we go into the second part, which is essentially a draft. Now, remember grade 12, everything is your draft work before your final work, okay? But it doesn't help to say a draft and then draft 1 and then draft 2 and then carry on. Just have, for your purposes, your plan, which includes your draft in terms of the ideas, not a fully written piece of work, okay? But remember, in class, yes, you're going to be doing a full essay in the draft stage where you're going to see, does my ideas make sense? Is it following a logical order? All those things with the full essay. So in the draft, we're using keywords, we're using ideas, we're using a mind map to create a story. Then we're going on to the third step, which is then a revision step. Now there we're going to say, okay, I've got all these things down there. Now I'm checking. Does this draft give my message to the reader? In other words, can they see what I want to say? Can they read what I want to say when they are reading my piece of work? So here is the part where you get to amend. And amend means just that, where you can scratch off, add in perhaps, or even, scrap the whole essay and start again if you want to. So that's the revision phase, okay? Then we come to the editing part, which is the next crucial part there. Now, if you're a language student that is struggling to find words or a variety of words to make us more interested in what you're going to read, you need to already, by the time you're getting these assessments done, have a vocabulary base, right? You've lived a life all along till now. So hopefully you've read books along the way, you've watched movies along the way, you've read newspapers along the way. And my sincere hope is that by this time you have captured certain words in your memory. That you feel, okay, if I want to say I'm feeling sad, I can use another word to say I'm feeling sad, or another phrase, whatever it is. So hopefully you've done that over the years, okay? So yeah, I'm saying to you, use all of the language techniques. Make sure that you've made use of maybe a statement in your essay. Have you possibly asked a rhetorical question in the essay, right? Maybe you've used figurative language in the essay where you are extending our normal way of thinking. So you're using very much emotive words to bring us into your thinking pattern. Then maybe you've decided, okay, I'm going to use jargon. Now remember with jargon, here be very careful because we say avoid too much of that, okay? Because then we start having all these terms that we don't even understand ourselves in the essay. So use words and things that make sense to you, but are obviously of a higher level of thinking. Right. And then make sure also parts of speech is being used correctly, figurative language used correctly, all those things. And that's done in the editing process. Please ensure that spelling errors, you can lose so much of marks if your language just doesn't make sense. It doesn't help that you want to have this brilliant idea, and when you put it down on the paper, you can't spell the words that you are supposed to be using. Right. So please make the dictionary also your friend in grade 12. Right. And then the last one is where we're going to call the published stage, okay? Or what we call the published stage. Now that is basically where the final is done and it is given in. all right, or it's written on the paper 3 and it's marked. So the final piece is just that. You can't have final and then final and then final. No, there's only one final piece, right? Everything prior to that is your draft or your rough work, as you'll call it. So that essentially is the writing process, and make sure you have mastered that as well in this year. Right. Now let's look at a writing strategy that you could employ, or hopefully you've employed over the years. And if you haven't, then take a look at a quick synopsis of how to work with writing. Now that was a quick video for you there to look at the peel structure. Remember, you must have also make use of this in all the paragraphs that you are using. Remember, you will give us a topic sentence, and all the ideas inside there must link back to the topic sentence, and essentially the last sentence or so must link back to the topic as well, okay? So whatever evidence also given, please ensure that it is actually substantial and it is true what you are saying. Now, sometimes with the creative writing, and let's say in a narrative, for example, or descriptive, you are allowed to, make things bigger than they are. But sometimes if you're sticking with the other genres, most of the time, we need accurate stats if you're going to be doing those genres. But I will tell you which ones those are just now when we are working with this. Right. So the essay grade 12s are basically the opportunity for where you as the writer express your views or your point of view on a particular subject matter. You are able to then maybe narrate a story to us, maybe an experience that you had personally, or an experience of somebody else that they shared with you. You'd like to talk about that, maybe in the reflective essay, for example. Okay, so your personal experiences, your life thus far, all of that will have played a role in the type of person you are. So you are allowed to use that knowledge base when writing the essay, the narrative essay, okay, or even an essay in general. So every single essay you're working with must have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Like you as a human being, you have a head, your body, and your feet, all right? That is how we are going to try and make sense of this. If you had to look at a human being, can they operate as well as they should if either of those things don't function? Possibly not, okay? If anything, it's not entirely possible. So if one of the sections are not functioning nicely, you will not be able to do justice to every task that will be given to you. Although you'd make an attempt, yes, but you're not going to be able to do it to the best or the most applicable way. All right. So the head, the body, and the feet have to work together to produce a good result at the end of the day. In the same way, the introduction, the body, and the conclusion must work together and make sense together for us to get a full made essay at the end that makes sense for everybody to read. Right. So basically, the introduction is where we want to catch the reader's attention. Now here you can have a statement or two, that's a quick statement or two basically, that's going to strike at the attention of the reader. In other words, they must read it and they must immediately say, whoa, okay, this is going to be a good one to mark or a good one to read, and continue to read that essay. So try and grab their attention immediately in the introduction. Right. Then we have the body. Now, the body is made up of a few paragraphs. Now, if you're looking at this essay, remember, there has to be paragraphs in it. They can't just be the introduction and then a whole one page full there and say that's the body and then another paragraph as a conclusion. That's not what it is, okay? You need to take the full content, which is the body, and break it into 2 to 3 paragraphs, if not 3 to 4 paragraphs, right? And then the last one will be obviously maybe the 5th paragraph, the conclusion. So there, every single paragraph you use has to have a different idea in it, but obviously that idea must link to the topic that you have chosen. So all the evidence as well in that paragraph must link to the content that you want to share with us, right? You can't just go and put in a sentence or a stat there just for the sake of it, and it has no bearing on what else you are saying. So everything has to make sense and have a logical flow. All right. And then the conclusion is that last paragraph. That paragraph is where we're saying you are rounding off the entire essay. Now, when you're doing that, remember, effectively, you want to tie up all of the loose ends. In other words, all those ideas you put in paragraph 2, 3, 4, and 5, we're now saying to you, tie it up and basically summarize it in your conclusion. Right. So basically, grade 12s, this is what I want you to have at the back of your mind, okay, or your head. In other words, I'm saying to you, there has to be that diagram that you're going to go to always refresh your memory on the particular content you're dealing with. Now, with the essay, this is a very simple diagram that summarizes everything you need to make sure you know of when dealing with the essay. Right. Now, let's get into the types of essays that we have that we would like you to make use of when you're writing. Now, although there are different types, you are allowed to employ the use of all the types of essays when you are tackling a topic. But be very careful when you're doing that as well, because if you don't know all of them very well, it becomes tricky when you are using them in the topic that you've chosen and you really mess up altogether. So if you that student that is struggling, for example, with maybe the expository or the discussive, which we're going to discuss just now, then rather stick to the safer options. All right. Like, for example, the first one, which is the narrative. Now, the narrative is the one where you should be knowing from the time you were born, because remember, when you were born, at some point when you started to remember life's experiences, you would think about the day when mom or dad or granny, whoever is, was putting you off to sleep, and they were maybe relating a bedtime story to you, okay? And they would start with once upon a time. Or even when you were reading little storybooks when you were growing up, you would remember things like Cinderella or maybe the Big Bad Wolf story. All of those things, okay, was there. So everything started with once upon a time, and this beautiful story then was created. Now, I'm saying take away the once upon a time word, but the idea of a story is what the narrative is. So there has to be some content here that is entertaining us. It's keeping us engaged. It's written in the past tense because obviously it has to now be more convincing, and it's the experience that you've had or an experience that somebody else had had. All right. So a narrative, a good story that you can create even out of a completely different realm altogether is totally fine. All right. But just make sure that it is making sense. Now, maybe at some point you've watched a movie that really struck your attention. Now here, you maybe find a topic that links to that idea that movie had. Now, be careful. If you're going to relate that story of that movie exactly as it happened, then you're bordering on the lines of copying. Right? It's not original. If you're going to take an essay that you read or a story that you read on the internet and you're going to try and push that content into a topic given to you and push it off as your own work, you are going to fail the task and fail the examination. So the moment you use other people's work as your own, you stand the risk of plagiarizing and getting a 0 for that essay in class. But more importantly, if you are found guilty of copying in the NSC exams, grade 12s, what happens? You are not resulted. There is inquiries upon investigations, and you can be actually completely barred for sitting in the next exams for the next couple of years. At least 3 years, you will not be able to write your grade 12. So you do not want to fall into that category. So yes, draw on the knowledge of those stories or those movies you've watched, but also put in your own ideas and make it as original as possible. All right, that is the narrative essay. Make it convincing and with your own ideas as well. The descriptive essay here is now where we're asking of you to describe something, all right, in a very vivid manner. Now you get to use adjectives. Remember those describing words that make things seem bigger than they actually are? Start using those descriptive words, all right. Basically also, if you're looking at an over-exaggeration of things, that is where it would come in the descriptive essay, okay? Your use of your hyperbole, for example. So please make sure you have, again, mastered that kind of essay. The third one is the reflective essay. Now, you will recall all of these years you've lived, you then came to grade 12. The experiences you had over the years, hopefully, when you got to grade 12, you reflected on those experiences and thought to yourself, okay, maybe I didn't do as great in grade 10 and in grade 11. And now I want to maybe become an architect or become a pilot or whatever it is. In order for me to get there, I need to do certain things. All right? And that is where the reflective essay comes in. It is giving you the opportunity to express an emotional reaction, a feeling that you've had over the years to a specific matter. All right? It's very personal. It's you reflecting on where you were, where you are right now, and possibly how you're going to move forward. Right? So it's threefold there, but we try and say, okay, you're here now. How are you going to go forward for at least a year or two later? So it's very much a sincere piece of writing. Okay, then we've got the next type of essay, which is the argumentative essay. Now this is the one that you love to do because remember, you love arguing. If mom says do this, you will say no, I can't do it now, I'll do it later because so and so and you carry on. Okay, and the other thing you do is tit for tat. If someone says something, you respond and then you carry on having this thing. Sort of like a debate. So here you get to argue a case. But we are saying for one side or one point of view. And when you have that point of view, you need to convince the reader that that is the best view to have. Nothing else. So remember, it is your argument based on your opinion. Right? It's written in the present tense in this genre. Then the next type of essay that we're working with is the discussive essay. Now the discussive essay is similar to the argumentative. The only thing here is that you are presenting two sides of the story. So the positive, the negative, the advantage and the disadvantage. And then you also able to do that very much in an impartial manner. So do not get involved in it and try and motivate and all of those things. We want it to be done impartially. Okay? Both sides of the argument shown to us, and then possibly maybe a mixed argument if you can. You do that. Right. Then the expository essay. Now this is the one that is probably the most challenging because here, grade 12s, you have to make sure there's a systematic response, a logical flow of what you are saying, but more importantly, it's based on facts and stats that cannot be disputed. So if you are going to use this kind of this genre to express your views, you need to ensure that you are giving us 100% of the truth in this. Okay, there's no longer the opportunity to say 1 in 4 people da 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 da, and then you think, okay, I've included the stat and it makes sense. No, valid stats, valid facts need to be included in this one. Right. So in terms of the next part that I'm going to focus on is the weighting of the essay. Now, you remember grade 12s, when we are marking, we mark according to a memo or a marking guideline. And in this case, we're using the rubric. Now, the rubric is dictating to the marker how to mark the essay based on various criteria and descriptors given in that criteria that we are maybe focusing on that part. Okay, so there will be various things to look at, and then they would give a mark then out of 50. So essentially, the criteria for the first part is content and planning, which has a percentage of 60%. So in other words, 60% out of 100%. 60% now is dealing with your ability as a learner to plan content and make sure it makes sense. All right. And that mark is then 30 marks out of the 50 marks. So once you've mastered that, you can already see that it's not difficult to pass the essay. Right. Then we've got the next part, which is your language, your style, and editing. Now that is important. If you again remember in the writing process we spoke about, where you're revising and you're editing, okay? There we're saying, look at the language you've used, look at the words you've used, check whether your spelling is correct. Did you use maybe homonyms, homophones, antonyms, maybe synonyms? If you've used figures of speech, have you used it appropriately? Okay, the style and writing, for example, is it very formal, informal? Remember, with the essays, we don't want to go informal. You got to keep it formal. So the use of colloquial language and jargon and all of those things and slang needs to be used with discretion, if not avoided as far as possible. All right, so your language, your style, and editing comes in here with an allocated 30% and then obviously a 15 mark allocated in terms of marks. And then your structure, an allocated percentage of 10% there. Do you have introduction, and then you have your body, your paragraphs? Is it a logical flow? Are the ideas moving from one idea to the next idea to the next idea? Have you been able to then summarize or surmise all the ideas in the conclusion? And that is a 5 mark that we're looking at on the rubric. So in total, 50 marks, and that's how we're marking the essay. All right. Now, hopefully, before you went to write your piece of work or your essay for this term, your teacher has shown you the rubric. If that's not the case, grade 12s, then you need to make sure you are familiar with the rubric, because it doesn't help you seeing a mark of 20 out of 50 and then wondering, why did I get that mark? So there will be an explanation in terms of the rubric saying why ma'am or sir gave you this mark for each of the categories or the criteria that is there. All right. So please familiarize yourself with the rubric. Now, when we're looking at the narrative essay here, the narrative essay is usually written in the past tense, as I said to you. It's telling a story that's happened in the past, for example. It doesn't have to be based on a true story, grade 12s, or your life's experience. It can be very much just a totally random event that you think might happen, but you are creating it. All right, to be a possibility. So this is exactly what I say, creative writing. So it's a storyline and it has to be convincing to the reader. So make sure that happens, okay? Now with the narrative, this is quite a nice piece of work, because remember, you'll captivate us with your introduction. You will ensure that your ending is either satisfying it could be confusing because then the reader would be like, okay, what is this person trying to say? But it means that he or she had to think about something, right, that you said. You do not want them to read a piece and say, okay, so obviously it's going to be a happy ending at the end of the day. That becomes boring to read. So obviously make sure it's not predictable when you're writing this one. There has to be a strong descriptive element. In other words, describing something intricately, okay? Making sure it is every possible avenue that can be used to explain this content you have explored in the essay. Right, so let's look at this diagram here. When we have the narrative, right, you remember Captain Hook from that story? Hopefully you have, all right? So we are saying here, like Captain Hook, you need to have a hook that will grab the attention of the audience immediately and lock them into your essay. All right, that's what the hook is there for. So the situation has to stir our imagination immediately. That is what you're going to outline in your introduction. Then we have the exposition. Now, the exposition is, if you're thinking of, example, the story of the three bears, right? There was the three little bears, or the three bears, and they lived in this house, blah, 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 and it continues. Now, that part where they're describing the characters, Mama Bear, Papa Bear, and Baby Bear, all those things, you are going to now obviously bring in the characters that you're speaking about in this essay. That's your exposition. There's also a background, a setting as to where these events are unfolding from, okay? So you're going to include that in the exposition part, okay? This is all obviously while you are planning and writing your final piece. You're also going to ensure that you have included a conflict situation. Now, remember, it doesn't happen, it doesn't make sense where you just have this nice flowing essay and nothing really, is going to happen that's going to make us think any different. So if you're going to include a conflict situation, you're going to take note about the fact that it is going to prevent the characters that you're speaking about. So you would think about maybe a protagonist and an antagonist, okay? The good one and the bad character. Now, there will be a situation where those two characters are not agreeing with each other, and that's the conflict situation that is there, that avoids that primary character from being successful in what he or she wants to do. So you will cover a conflict situation. Then that rising action part, remember, is talking about all the situations that happen before the point of conflict. So all those events will be mentioned there, and you will create a sense of suspense. Because again, at that point of suspense being created, now the reader's thinking, okay, what's going to happen? Is he going to fall? Is he going to jump off the building? Is he going to kill himself? Whatever it is that you're describing, okay, or talking about here, you need to obviously ensure that that rising action is mentioned. Now, also at that point, we can use what we call the flashback technique. And the flashback, again, is thinking about a previous incident that happened that is now here affecting this particular action. All right. So maybe something happened in the character's previous space, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that has brought him or her to where they are right now. And this is the event that is unfolding. So that flashback technique can be used here. And then the climax, obviously, is once you've built all that rising action to the point at the top, the turning point, we call that, okay, the climax. Either it's going to go towards creating the turning point here, a positive one, or a negative one. So it's the most exciting part of this story. What's going to happen? Are they going to land up together? Are they going to go their separate ways? What's going to happen to these people? Are they stranded for the next 10 years? Is it an island where there's no one there except maybe one character that's going to be living on the earth? All those things can come in here. So let your creative juices run here. Right. Then the following action is basically releasing that tension, that has been created. That suspense which has been created in the essay, you now want to release that in basically the following action. So the story is now moving to a summation, a conclusion of what has happened thus far. And then the resolution is basically the outcome of the story. Very important, okay? The outcome. It is how the things are going to end up for that particular character or those characters involved. Right. So an example of a narrative story introduction could be the following. It was a dark and stormy night. The rain fell in torrents, except at occasional intervals when it was checked by a violent gush of wind, which swept up the streets, rattling along the housetops and fiercely agitating the scanty flame of the lamps that struggled against the darkness. So look at how many descriptive words there are, okay? Rain fell in torrents, violent gush of wind. In other words, it is tremendously violent. Okay, it's not this sort of like flowing, quiet wind. It's rattling rooftops. It's making a noise. It is, it's causing fear to be instilled in people when they are dealing or experiencing this, right? Then fiercely agitating. You will know that when you are agitated or you are frustrated, you are not resting. You are like, okay, I should do this, I should do that. And you're on the go 24/7. We have what we call the flight or the fight mode. That is where we're talking about that agitation that's constantly there. All right. So basically, these are the things that are being described by all of the words that are being used in this introduction. So make sure, again, it grabs us and it keeps us wanting more from you when you are writing. So you're going to check, was your introduction attention grabbing? Did you write in the past tense? Did you maintain the reader's attention throughout the essay? And did you make use of maybe words in the essay that attracted his sense or her sense of sight, of smell, of sound, of taste, and tactile? All right, that kind of things must be engaged with when doing the narrative essay. And then maybe have you included a strong descriptive element. Now, the next type of essay, the descriptive essay, this one is the one where you get to describe a person, a memory perhaps, a situation that happened in your life or someone else's life, or again, a created situation. So here, it's very much the use of adjectives to describe something. So here we're also looking at aspects of mood or atmosphere. Have you created a good atmosphere with the piece of work that you have written? Right. So in other words, when the person reads that piece of work to an audience, for example, do they get to experience a different atmosphere or a different mood than what you were experiencing when you wrote that piece of work? Right. Use of figurative language or figures of speech here is obviously be careful, use it in moderation, and over usage would make it just too repetitive and actually, not very good for us to continue reading. So make use of them, yes, and create a powerful image for us to imagine, but at the same time, not an over usage. Right. Then here's a diagram there for you to look at how to attract someone's attention in terms of making use of the 5 senses and to keep us engaged in the topic. You will look at that in your own time. Remember also, we're creating a picture here using the adjectives and the adverbs. Please, grade 12s, again, if you're struggling with language, keep the language simple, okay? Don't overuse words that you have no idea what they mean, because then it shows that you actually didn't really do justice to the topic. So again, when you're making use of words that are attracting the 5 senses, this makes the text more interesting. All right? There's an example of how you would speak about something and then how you would show the exact same thing. So for very simply just saying, I heard footsteps creeping behind me and it made the whole situation scarier, that is, yes, interesting, but it's not as interesting when you are looking at showcasing that. Now you can talk about how that creaky sound came in of people's footsteps, okay? Or maybe how that sounds then affected your heart rate, where it started pounding, your chest pounding against the walls. So your heart pounding against the chest walls. That kind of thing, okay, must come through when you are showing the experience to us. Right. Then please, in an instant, we are saying, take the reader from the mundane, ordinary way of feeling things to a place where they get a sense of surprise, a sense of urgency with what you are saying. The fear becomes more evident for them. Those kind of things is what we want you to look at. So remember, if you're talking about the crunching feeling of something, that is going to evoke a powerful visual in the mind of a person. It's going to say what was the state of the body that was experiencing these things, right? If you had to imagine maybe a body lying in the morgue and you now are working there, and all of a sudden you hear this creaking sound or a kick against the against the surface, and you start imagining that something going on, that kind of thing. Okay, so picture how you would be horrified and you would be so scared out of your wits and you'll run out of the room, that kind of thing. But now show us in terms of the words being used, in terms of adjectives and adverbs, how you would be running out of that room for dear life. All right. That kind of thing must come through with the descriptive piece of work. Right, then ask yourself the question, do you have experience or a background knowledge of what you're talking about when you're describing it? Did you make sure that you've used either the past or the present tense? Both are acceptable in this instance. Have you created a powerful image in the mind of the reader? Have you made use of words that attract their various senses into imagining certain things? And then did you use the figures of speech effectively? Right, then we get into the reflective essay. The reflective essay, again, I said to you at the beginning, is where we're sitting at this particular point right now. There have been events that have unfolded before this to get us to where we are, and we're going to move forward from here on. Right? So this is the genre that will allow you to do that. Reflect on what you feel seriously about at this particular point and how it's going to affect you going forward. So it's called all about introspection. Right. It's very much personal and subjective at the same time. So it's not objective, okay? It's your viewpoints. The ideas, the feelings you are expressing should actually show us that you really are sincere about what you say. It's not just that it's just one of those things that happen and you're not really concerned too much. All right. So when you're reflecting, you're doing that deep contemplation. You're talking about things that affected you intensely, and it's now dictating how your life is going to unfold in the next couple of weeks or months. Right. The writer could, for example, reflect on his hopes, on his aspirations, on his dreams of where he'd like to be in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, remember with the reflective essay, the word reflect means just that. Contemplate, deep thinking, introspect on ideas that or experiences you have gone through thus far. Now here you want to write about what you know or you've experienced. You want to include your thoughts and your feelings on that particular topic, and you want to use interesting words. So you're going to make use of possibly figurative language, for example, that will allow us to see or experience the emotions that you have gone through when you were reflecting on an issue. Again, you can make use of the flashback technique. Now that again, I've explained to you in the narrative essay. Remember, whatever there's events happened before this to bring you to where you are right now. So your essay begins essentially in the present tense. It goes back to a few events that happened prior to this, so back in the past tense, and then it returns into the present tense again as to where you are right now. Okay, so if you had to imagine, for example, somebody standing on a bridge and about to jump off the bridge. Okay, so there has been maybe 2 or 3 events that have led to where this person's at this point of feeling like there's no way out, I'm not going to be able to do it, and carry on, and all of those emotions that go on there. Very dark place to be in, okay? And hopefully many of us can steer far away from that kind of ideas. So there he's sitting standing on the bridge and contemplating now, am I going to jump? Or maybe I should, or maybe I shouldn't. So here is the reflective part coming to this point, and then the present is now, am I going to jump or not? And hopefully they do not jump, because their flashback has been used, the technique, and they've realized it's a waste of time trying to take something away that can be very fruitful and successful going forward. All right, so the experience there has to return to the present. So an example of a reflective essay could be, let's say we had a topic like the moment of truth. You can say, everyone has that one moment which changes one's life. A moment that you wish had never happened. A moment that you cannot avoid or escape. The moment of truth. Now that's obviously a very mature way of putting it across, okay? But you again, in your own time and space, you will find words and ideas that will still give us this kind of idea in relation to the moment of truth, okay? If that's a topic that is given to you. So again, remember, the topic will dictate how you're going to write the piece of work. And there you go. Reflective means just that, to reflect, and it's thinking deeply about a situation or something that's happened. And basically, we want to say it's an unhurried consideration of something that has affected you. Right. Further on to that, it is basically where we're asking you to jot down a few ideas based on experiences of your own or experiences of others, opinions possibly that you have heard of other people in relation to the topic that is there, events that have also happened in relation to the topic given, or maybe some new information that you have just experienced that might be in relation to the topic that you are choosing here. So discuss your response to thoughts and feelings, and here we're saying you are basically exploring these ideas while learning about yourself or the ideas that you are holding. It also gives us an opportunity to look at how we have gained knowledge over the years. So when you reflect, you're talking to yourself basically internally, and you're seeing how you got to this particular point. Right. So that's what the reflective essay is all about. Then we come into the argumentative essay. Please remember, I said to you, it's only one particular viewpoint that you are arguing. So you take a stance and you make sure all the evidence given from that point forward is in relation to the statement you have made. Right. So here you get to either motivate or defend the idea that you chose to work with. It is a subjective essay in which you are trying to convince us that your point of view is the most valuable point of view, and no matter what people say, it's non-negotiable that only your viewpoint is the best viewpoint ever. All right, so that's what we get to do here in the argumentative. So your opinions about this topic, please grade 12, has to be very clear. It has to come through with everything you are mentioning in the essay. All right. Then look at basically reasons in your head as to why you chose that particular topic. And then when you're thinking about the content, see that that the content meets the reasons for why you chose the topic. Right? Further on, make sure it's in the present tense. There has to be the beginning of the essay where you're stating your opinion or your point of view, and then that's done in your introduction. And then through paragraphs 2, 3, 4, you are now using language to persuade us or convince us about that viewpoint. Right? You can include stats here. And again, the stats would have to be very much valid stats, okay? Be careful not to put in stats that don't make sense at all. When you're looking at the strong conclusion in this essay, please ensure that it actually then summarizes your content and it states that this is why you hold the viewpoint. Right. The discursive essay. Now here, grade 12s, I did mention to you, you get the opportunity to discuss both sides of the argument and gives us maybe a third option, which is the mixed response. So here it's objective. It's not done partially, okay? You are being impartial. So it is objective. You are steering away from nouns such, and therefore it's always written in the third person. It's written in the present tense, non-negotiable. You give your indication of your opinion at the end of the essay, but this should only be done in the conclusion. So you give us both sides of the argument, and in the conclusion, give us the third option, right? Then the reasons to support each view must be there. So make sure you're using links in terms of linking words like however, further, furthermore, therefore, or this shows, all those kind of words to connect one idea to the next idea. Right, let's look at topic, for example, like this. Artificial intelligence has improved our lives. Now, yeah, there's many viewpoints to this, grade 12s. Some feel as if it is the end and the end all of our lives. We cannot do without it. And some feel it's the worst thing ever created. It is a place for idle minds that do not want to go and do anything further in life. And so they just ask AI and AI gives you the solution. And without even thinking further than that, you go and employ what AI does. And what happens then? AI decides to give you that viewpoint. When you put it into practice, it doesn't work out. So you got to take sometimes your knowledge and link it to what AI says and then see if it actually makes sense. Right. So let's see what I've got down here. Some people believe that the use of AI is bad, while others believe that it is fantastic. However, everyone must agree that now it is hard to imagine the world without it. Artificial intelligence cannot be blamed for what goes wrong in the world. We should rather blame the people who use it badly. Right. So very much linked to something like we would talk about with technology, right? There has to be a human behind it. Unfortunately, actually, fortunately, we human beings can never really be replaced, right? So you are there, you are unique, you have your own set of viewpoints, you've had experiences over the years, you have gained knowledge and skills over the years, and here comes a computer and says, okay, do it this way. Sometimes it might be correct, and sometimes it's way off, and you need to have that human behind it to maybe modify how it's reacting to the situation, right? So that's what we're talking about in this essay. So you have to express both sides of the topic, and at the end only say whether you believe it to be good or bad, or possibly beneficial and also not so beneficial. That kind of idea only comes in the conclusion. Right. Then with regards to the argumentative essay, I've done this for you already. The discursive one, remember, presenting both sides of the argument, making sure we're using linking words to link all the ideas in the various paragraphs. We're writing in the present tense. We're using the third person response here. And we ensure that we're creating our own viewpoint. Right. Then the final one is the expository essay. The expository essay is a well-researched one. Now, if you're going to do this in the exam situation, it's pretty difficult to write an expository essay if you haven't researched it. So hopefully, when you do this, you have, or you've chosen a topic that where you're going to employ the use of the expository genre. You have ensured that you have a lot of ideas with substance behind it. So if you're going to say A is A, then you must show us why A is A, with all the evidence that makes sense as to why A is A and not B. Right. So basically what I'm saying to you here is a well-researched topic with all the facts, all the stats, all the ideas that are linked to what you want to say, right? And they actually make sense. So it's a factual essay where you're communicating your ideas in a informative way, yes, but in a systematic, logical way. Please make sure it's logical and it makes sense from one idea to the next, taking us from the known to the unknown. That kind of idea must come through, and it's always written in the present tense, please. Now let's look at a topic, for example, like this one. Explain the likely consequences of not adhering to social distancing regulations during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now let's not even talk COVID-19, because remember the spin-off from COVID-19 was all these other diseases that I've come across, which is similar to a flu, but it's sometimes worse than the normal flu that we have experienced, right? So there's symptoms that are similar to the COVID virus that we did experience or pandemic, and now these kind of things we want to talk about. So don't even be too concerned with COVID words here, right? But the consequences of not adhering to social distancing regulations. Now, year grade 12s, you have to then know, why did we employ the use of the masks? Or why did we ensure that we were sitting 1 meter or 1.5 meters away from each other? Why did we ensure that even if we were on the playground, that kids were not engaging with each other as closely as they're engaging with each other now, right? All those things. Obviously, you would talk about looking at the fact that there were so many deaths happening during the time of these of the COVID pandemic, because people were not aware of how to protect themselves. So if they broke the regulations, the consequences was that they would get very sick, and if they had basically diseases already in the system that they were of theirs, then that would be aggravated by the COVID virus, and the end would obviously then be either they passed on or they got very, very sick and had spin-off things like maybe nerve disorders or other lymphatic problems, okay, with the lymphatic system problems. So all of that came out of not adhering to social distancing. Again, you're going to ensure that you've researched topics before you have written about those things, okay? There's no need to try and sound intelligent and actually make no sense at all, because then the reader and the audience would know that you're not making sense at all. All right? So always keep in mind the target audience. The person that's reading this particular piece or is listening to this particular piece must be catered for when you are doing this essays. Okay, so the visual stimuli is that one where it's either maybe 6.1 or 7.1. You have given basically maybe 2 or 3 images, right? You need to choose one of them. Now remember, the visual stimuli is there for you to have a spin-off of ideas from that image. So there's a picture there and you can interpret it in any way possible, either in a literal sense or a figurative sense. You are also very much allowed to use any of the genres we've spoken about thus far, all the types of essays, okay? More importantly, please, whatever you're choosing to write about must be linked to an aspect in the picture. So not the whole picture, but maybe one part of the picture struck your attention and you then built an essay around that, okay? Please ensure you have a suitable title given in response as well, so that we do not then think that you just wrote a random essay here. Please ensure you focused on the setting. You have maybe mentioned a relationship in this particular piece of work, but that relationship again must be a valid relationship, okay? That exists with the aspects within the image. Please avoid taking, as I said to you, someone else's work and pushing it off as your own. It is not going to work, grade 12s. There are ways to find out whether this piece of work is your own or not. Also remember, ma'am or sir has taught you English maybe in grade 11 and taken you up to grade 12, or they've taught you at a lower grade and they know of you as a person, and all of a sudden you produce this brilliant essay that you never produced before. It's obviously going to hint to something saying that it's not your own work. So do not do that and find yourself in the hot water, okay, for that. So avoid taking other people's work and, again, making use of it and not including your own. So you take that idea and you put in your original ideas, mix and match here, and give us the response, and you will still get a very good piece of work. Be creative, attract our attention, and keep us engaged throughout. Right, please remember, kids, please keep it very short and simple. All right, and hopefully it's not the long kiss that we all think about when we think about this month of February. Right, so the example here given to you is the withered flowers. Now you'd see if you can maybe, I don't know if I can maybe broaden the screen a bit. Okay, so there we go. Let's look at it like that. Right, here is a vase, you may say vase, okay, a vase, and within that is supposed to be water that would have been in there, and the flowers would have bloomed to be a little bit more beautiful. All right. Now, in this instance, obviously that's not the case. There's no water in there. There's no evidence of seeing any kind of water. And then you see petals have, or leaves have fallen down. Now, I'm saying withered flowers, but you could say maybe withered roses, because that looks like a rose there, for example, okay? But anyway, whatever's there, again, you will find an aspect in that image and you'll write about it. So this picture, again, could be literal, or it could be a figurative interpretation, right? Maybe if you're thinking about the story of Beauty and the Beast, remember he had to fall in love before the last petal fell off the rose, otherwise he would be cursed the way he is, or the way he was at that particular moment in time, remain the same way. So that kind of idea can come through, okay? But again, taking that idea and putting your own experiences in there would obviously make it original, all right? Or possibly a little bit more original than copying the whole thing. So the dominant image here in this picture is the dried flowers in the vase. The topic and your essay will be influenced by this image. Now, possible ideas to look at would have been maybe moral decay, all right? Making immoral decisions that didn't always pan out correctly, obviously, will lead to the doing away of beauty, the doing away of innocence, all those things, okay? Looking at death, perhaps, when the life of someone is being sucked away by a disease or an illness, and therefore they now become like these leaves that are falling out of the vase, for example, here. And in this instance, maybe the disease is killing them and they are reduced to bones and skin. Right. Then we've got maybe fragility of human life, okay? The fact that a person who was very strong previously, all of a sudden is who was never faced by things in life before, is now maybe gone through an experience in life, and they are basically very affected by it to a point where they are in a fragile state and could actually break down or lose any part of themselves in this process. Right. And then maybe environmental issues, where if things are not cleaned up all the time or services are not delivered to us that needs to be there, you will see the damaging effects. Like, for example, you would know you're driving to school in the morning with your mom or your dad, or maybe some of you are driving yourselves. What happens? No robots working, or if a robot is there, it might be bent over to the other side of the road, all those things, okay? Because not taken care of, the result is the damaging effects. All right, and that is the ideas you can come across when you're writing these kind of essays, the visual stimuli ones. Right, so write down a few ideas on each topic, eliminate the topic that doesn't make sense, okay? What we're saying here is at the beginning, your 6 topics or 7 topics, you can choose 2 of them and narrow it down to 1 perhaps. Remember, you have to be able to write a lot of content on that, okay? Do not repeat those things. Underline all the keywords in the chosen topic to ensure that you do not miss important information. More importantly, choose a topic that you fully understand, grade 12s. Choose one that interests you and allows you to write a good essay which the reader will be interested in. If your essay requires knowledge, please choose a topic that you have sufficient information on. Develop enough key details. Don't be afraid to change the essay halfway through if you find you're not doing justice to the topic. It's totally fine. Teachers would rather want to see a nice, fully fledged essay done and credit you for that than having you stick with a topic that does not allow you to get the maximum mark. Again, do not make use of inflated vocabulary. Make sure it's vocab that you actually would use in a normal setup. All right. So grade 12s, that was essentially the topic dealing with the essay genres. Okay. Please make sure that you go back, revise the type of essays that you have done over the years. And more importantly, that when you're sitting now and doing your formal pieces of work and you will write your June exams, paper 3 and things like that, or even your prelims, ensure that you do justice with the essay. Also, please do not just do it now in term 1 and forget the types of essays that are there. It must become part of you. It must become a system where whenever you read something or you watch something, start writing a piece on that, okay? So that you are practicing the skill of writing and presenting. That is one of the skills that we are testing of you in your grade 12 NSC examination. So I want to thank you so much for joining me on this lesson this afternoon. I know that it might have been a busy week, but or a weekend as well, but you've actually taken the time to join us for these lessons. So thank you once again, and until the next lesson in English Home Language, do take care of yourself, and let's hope it's going to be a brilliant year going forward.